The recording has to start. Okay. So cholera, we are starting with cholera first. Cholera, as we all know, is caused by Vibrio cholerae. Okay, Vibrio cholerae is responsible for cholera. What do you all say? It's airborne, waterborne, cholera. Cholera
Waterborne.
is airborne, waterborne.
Waterborne.
It is basically a diarrheal infection. It is
She
mainly
can't
spreads through
hear us,
water.
Swarupa.
Okay,
If you
where there
want
is
to
not
get our
proper
word, please
sanitization.
text in the text
So
box.
and unhygienic places where water is not clean, your drinking water is contaminated, and those waters, when used for cooking, it cause Vibrio cholerae spreads these through. Okay, through these. So caused by Vibrio cholerae, acute diarrheal illness. And as we know, cholera, Vibrio cholerae, it is comma shaped. Okay, the organism is comma shaped. We have studied the different shapes of organisms, and the peculiar feature of Vibrio cholerae is they are comma shaped, gram negative, aerobic, facultative anaerobic bacillus, and size ranges from 1 to 3 μm in length and zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.8 mu in diameter. Okay. Antigenic structure is made up of flagellar antigen and somatic antigen. You all are aware of the H antigen, which is known as the flagellar antigen, and the O antigen, which is known as the somatic antigen. Okay. Coming to virulence and pathogenicity. So, how does it occur? Ingestion of Vibrio cholerae. Ingestion means as it the intake. Okay, as you take contaminated water. Also, ingestion means intake when it goes into your body, when it enters your body. Then resistant to gastric acids sometimes and colonize in small intestine. Virulence of non-toxigenic Vibrio cholerae O1 strain. Okay, this is about that strain particularly. They're talking about the particular strain, but generally it colonizes in the small intestine. They secrete enterotoxin, and then the enterotoxins. We have studied that bacteria secrete exotoxins and enterotoxins. Exotoxins and enterotoxins. So, exotoxins which are secreted outside the cell and enterotoxins inside. So, enterotoxins bind to the intestinal cells. Chloride channels activated, release large quantities of electrolytes and bicarbonates, fluid hypersecretion leading to diarrhea and dehydration. So, this is how it happens inside your body. Then host, so it is in children 10 or more susceptible than adults. So children are more susceptible than adults, and elderly people are also at high risk. Sex, it can be in males and females. It's nothing like sex specific. Then less immune are as high at risk. It is always the case when the immunity is less, they are high at risk. Okay, people with low gastric acid levels, because gastric acids, they inhibit the growth of organisms. Okay, as we all know, acidic ph will not allow the organisms to grow. So gastric ph, if it is low, people with low gastric acid levels, gastric acids are important for the proper balance of bacterial balance in your body, in your intestines. Okay, as I told you, acidic ph, it matters a lot. Then the blood types, so depending upon the blood group. So I told you all poor sanitary conditions, where it is mostly in underdeveloped countries and poor countries. They mostly say Asian countries are also pinpointed because of the poor hygiene. Poor hygiene, you know, Africa, Asia, India comes into it, the slum areas of India, where you have poor sanitary conditions. So you have much risk of transfer in these areas, okay, where regions where there is sanitation is not maintained properly. And sanitation, of course, wherever it is developed countries, they are well sanitized, well hygienic, okay, hygiene conditions are maintained. Even communities are far located. Okay, they are not like cramped like us, like our slum areas, where there are chances of spread are more. Hmm? So it is, as they say, it's common in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So the lower parts. Then if the food is undercooked or raw. So we know when the food is cooked properly, the high temperature it kills the organisms. And in case of milk, also we know that. So similarly, food also, if it is you eat raw or you eat undercooked food, so it will have the chances of organism multiplying and surviving are more. But if the food is cooked properly, like steamed, so under steam under pressure and all, so your organisms are killed. So that is what happens. Then in contaminated seafood, even in developed countries, especially in shellfish, okay, so seafood, if it is contaminated with this water, sewage water sometimes seeps into water, sewage water seeps into drinking water. So all these cases are there where your contamination chances are more. So seafood also can get contaminated. Hmm? Then people with low levels of stomach acid, as I told you all. Then children, older adults, and some people who are under medications. Okay, like diabetic people are susceptible to many things, they say, because of the medication. Then type O blood, so mostly they say type O blood people are more at risk. So reasons are not clear, but they are at risk. Transmission. How is it transferred? Humans only reservoirs. Okay, contaminated food or water. Then humans only reservoir means what? Humans only reservoir means you understand what is a reservoir, no? Reservoir means where you have more number of, like we say, reservoir of water. Okay, so the amount of water is more over there. So humans are reservoirs of organisms. So the number of cholera are, they humans, they become carriers. The organism multiplies within the infected person. So human beings are the reservoirs, they say. Then contaminated food or water. So I told you all it can pass through contaminated food and water. Then inadequate sewage treatment, lack of water treatment, improperly cooked shellfish, and transmission by casual contact. So all these are the factors where transmission can take place. Hmm? Then a period of communicability. So how much time it is, like it is a communicable disease, it spreads. So how much time? A few days after recovery. By end of a week, 70% of patients are non-infectious. By end of third week, 98% of patients are non-infectious. Now, incubation means how much time the organism requires. It multiplies within your body and then shows your symptoms. Ranges from few hours to 5 days. So it can be you had some contaminated water few hours ago and you are showing symptoms, or it can be you had 5 days before and now you're showing symptoms. Okay. So average it is 1 to 3 days. Within 1 to 3 days, you start showing the symptoms of diarrhea or dysentery. Hmm? Short incubation period. They have a short incubation period and high gastric pH. Consumption of high dosage of cholera. Hmm? Okay. So it depends upon how much of Vibrio cholerae you have taken in. Okay, consumption of high dosage of cholera means it like you, if you have consumed some contaminated water or you have eaten some street food which was contaminated with Vibrio cholerae. So how much amount of cholera you have ingested. So it depends upon that how much time you take to show the symptoms. Okay, if you have consumed less amount of cholera, you will take like more time to show the symptoms. And if you have taken a high dosage of cholera, means the amount of water which you drank had high load of vibrio cholerae, so you will immediately start showing some symptoms within 4 to 5 hours. Okay, so the water, the infectious doses 10 to the power 3, 10 to the power 6 organisms. So water, if you have consumed, it has 10 to the power 3, 10 to the power 6 organisms, then it is infectious. Ingested food, okay, food organism ranges 10 to the power 2 to 10 to the power 4. Okay, so symptoms, it is mild or no symptoms at all. So mostly it is vomiting, cramps, diarrhea, dysentery, and it is rice water. The stools when they pass, it is like it is called rice water stools because it is watery, it is white watery, so it is called as rice water stool. So this is very peculiar about Vibrio cholerae infection, diarrhea infection. It is very peculiar about diarrhea infection where the stools are white and watery, so it's called as rice water stools. Hmm? So it has to be treated immediately, or there can be death within 18 hours or so. Hmm? Diarrhea and dysentery have to be treated immediately because loss of fluids is more in these cases. Hmm? So this is the type of stools with this rice water diarrhea. It is called as, and more severe. Okay, these are the types of cholera. So here it is. One is cholera gravis, which is more severe. Then cholera sicca. Okay. So then cholera in children. So cholera gravis is when it is more severe symptoms, rapid loss of body fluids. The person becomes very weak. Okay. The previous slide also I showed you all the boy, African boy. They become very weak because loss of water. Hmm? Loss of water, diarrhea, leads to loss of water in your body. So rapid loss of body fluids, then rapidly lose more than 10% of body weight. So the person becomes very lean. Dehydration and shock, patient's skin turning bluish gray hue because of extreme loss of fluids. So his skin color changes to bluish gray because of extreme loss of fluids, and death within 12 to 12 hours or so. Hmm? Death can occur within 2 to 3 hours also if not treated immediately. Okay, you can understand the severity. Then cholera sicca is an old term describing a rare severe form of cholera that occurs in epidemic cholera. Okay, so that's an old term which is used. This form manifests as ileus and abdominal distension from massive outpouring of fluid and electrolytes into dilated intestinal loops. Okay, so there is massive outflow of fluids and electrolytes into dilated intestinal loops. Mortality is high, with death resulting from toxemia before the onset of diarrhea and vomiting. So, mortality rate is high in this case, because there is death, immediate death from toxemia before the onset of diarrhea. Okay, someone is trying to enter. Harish. Harish is not in your batch, no? Is this from your batch, Arvind?
No, ma'am.
This is not from your batch, no? Arvind, Prashant.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
ఇల్లే మ్యామ్.
ఓ వినిపించదు కదా మర్చిపోతున్నా.
The mortality, as I told you, this is cholera sicca, and the before one was cholera gravis, where the symptoms are very severe and there is rapid loss, and death can occur within 2 to 3 hours also. Here it is, there is massive outpouring of fluid and electrolytes into the intestinal loops. Mortality is high. The mortality in this condition is high because of the unusual presentation. Failure to recognize the condition as form of cholera is common. Okay, so what happens is, generally you misunderstand it with a normal dysentery, so you cannot make out that it is cholera. Initial stages, stomach pain, vomiting, these are like common symptoms of any infection. So initially we don't take much attention that it is cholera. So in those cases, there is death because you're not able to identify that it's cholera in the early stages, and then it becomes very severe because cholera patients have to be treated immediately with electrolytes. Hmm? Okay, so it can happen in children also. Only breastfed children are protected. Symptoms are severe and fever is there if it's in children. Shock and drowsiness. Okay, in case of children, it's hypoglycemia. and which may lead to convulsions also. Then rotavirus infection may give similar picture and need to be excluded. So as I told you, it becomes difficult to diagnose because it has the symptoms are similar to other infections. Okay, in many cases it happens that the symptoms are similar to other infections. So to differentiate and come to a conclusion that it is cholera it takes time. Consequences. Now, what can happen when there is severe dehydration, intravascular volume depletion, severe metabolic acidosis, hypokalemia, cardiac arrest? Okay, you can have it can turn to low blood sugar levels because of extreme loss of fluids. The sugar levels go down. Okay, so it is hypoglycemia. Then, because of this, you can have seizures or coma. Hmm? Then it can lead to cardiac and renal failure, sunken eyes, decreased skin color, almost no urine production because the loss of water in your body is so much that there is no urine production. Due to diarrhea, there is so much loss of water. There, your eyes, it becomes sunken, color becomes pale, skin color, and almost no urine production. Okay, okay. So I hope you are understanding. Is it clear till here? Pragati, you're there, no? Sahiti, Pragati, is it okay? Okay. So, diagnosis. Now, I have told you in the last class also, diagnosis is for all these diseases is mostly common. First, you have to do. I told you last time also. It is first microbial studies, microscopic study, then culture, then biochemical, then coming to molecular, serological, and molecular. So these are the common steps for every disease. You have many diseases in your syllabus, so every disease, that is the way you have to write. Okay, now here it is depending upon clinical diagnosis and differential diagnosis. Okay, so depending upon clinical diagnosis, you have these which you can find out, and depending upon, so clinical, cholera should be considered in all cases with severe water and vomiting. So whenever it is watery, diarrhea and vomiting, you have to conclude that this is cholera. Traveling to affected areas and eating shellfish. Okay, so if you are traveling to areas which are affected or under poor sanitation, so there are chances of getting cholera. And if you have eaten shellfish, as I told you, all can be consuming shellfish which is infected with the contaminated water. Seafoods, all which come in contact with contaminated water, can lead to spread of cholera, Vibrio cholerae, and no distinguishing clinic for cholera. More than this, there are no other features. No? It's only diarrhea, vomiting. Then differential diagnosis, enterotoxigenic E. coli, can be bacterial food poisoning, and viral gastroenteritis. So you have to uh, clear up if it's not E. coli infection or it is not bacterial food poisoning like salmonella food poisoning or staph, and then viral gastroenteritis. It should not be rotavirus. So these you have to rule out. It's not rotavirus, it's not food poisoning, it's not E. coli. Then you have to conclude it's cholera, Vibrio cholerae. And diagnosis, as I told you all, you have to take the stool culture for diagnosis. Okay, you have to culture the stool sample to find out Vibrio cholerae, and then you can do, after culturing, you can do microscopic examination, you can do staining, and you can conclude. So confirm presence of cholera toxin, cholera rapid test dipstick says. So you have the stick test nowadays for every disease. So you can do the stick test also. Okay. So other lab findings. So what are the other symptoms what you get during cholera? There is dehydration leads to high blood urea and serum creatinine. Hematocrit and WBC will also be high due to hemo concentration. Okay. So in these you have hematocrit and WBCs also become high. If you do the blood picture, you will find this due to hemo concentration, okay, increase in RBCs. Then dehydration and bicarbonate loss in stool leads to metabolic acidosis with wide anion gap. Hmm. So dehydration and bicarbonate loss in stool leads to metabolic acidosis. Hmm. Then total body potassium is depleted, but serum level may be normal due to effect of acidosis. Okay, so because of dehydration, the potassium level goes down completely, but serum levels are normal. Hmm? Now, treatment, how do you treat it? We all know that for dehydration and diarrhea, these are the oral sachets which we get, which are electrolyte sachets, which will replace the electrolytes in your body. They'll replace the sugar and salt loss in your body. Okay, so this can be given oral or it can be given intravenous. In severe cases, it's intravenous, or else if you're treating at home, it's oral. You have to treat with these sachets, ORS sachets. Then antimicrobial therapy. Okay, so first is this through rehydration, then it is antimicrobial therapy. So these are the guidelines for cholera management. Okay, so how do they? This is by WHO, and they say they have WHO for all diseases. It gives guidelines for management. Okay, now this is for cholera. So they say the steps in the treatment are: first assess for dehydration, then rehydrate the patient and monitor frequently, and reassess the hydration status. Okay, so the patient has to be monitored frequently, administer an oral antibiotic to the patient with severe dehydration, and then feed the patient. You have to continuously feed the patient because there is constant loss of water and fluids from their body. So the patient has to be supplied with nutrition continuously, food and water. Hmm? So this is all about that. Then ORS administration, you'll know this. Okay, so this is assessment of the patient with diarrhea for dehydration based on WHO. Now, how does WHO classify it into severe stages of diarrhea? Okay, so predicted degree of dehydration. How much is the degree of dehydration? This is like depending upon the general appearance, eyes, thirst, skin pinch, estimated fluid deficit. Okay, so depending upon all these features, they are classified. Like they are the person's appearance is examined, his eyes, how much thirsty he is feeling. Then if he's you have to pinch the skin and see how much he's reacting to it. Okay, then estimated fluid deficit. Now, if the degree of dehydration is less than 5%, it can be 5 to 10% or more than 10%. Okay, so in this case, if it is less than 5%, the person is well alert. Okay, his eyes are normal, he drinks normally and not very thirsty. He goes after you pinch, he reacts, it goes back quickly, means he reacts immediately. Estimated fluid deficit is less than 50 ml per kg. So this is when the person is almost normal, with not more symptoms. But here, if the dehydration is 5 to 10% of dehydration, so the person looks restless and irritable. His eyes are sunken. Okay, thirsty, drinks eagerly. So that person feels very thirsty and drinks eagerly. And when you pinch, the reaction is slow. Okay, so, and 50 to 100 ml of ml per kg is the estimated fluid deficit. Okay. Now, if the dehydration is severe, if they say it's very severe, more than 10% dehydration, so the symptoms are like the person will be abnormally sleepy or lethargic. He'll have sunken eyes. He drinks poorly or unable to drink. So the person becomes so weak that he's unable to drink water. That is when you have to put him on intravenous ORS. Okay, that is when the person, when he is unable to drink water on his own, you have to they admit and they give intravenous ORS and all. And when you pinch, he is not able to react. Okay, goes back very slowly, and water loss is more than 100 ml per kg. So this is when it is severe. The third column is when it is severe. The symptoms are these. Okay. Okay. This is depending upon the dehydration status. Like if he has no dehydration, has two or more signs of dehydration, and has two or more of these signs with severe dehydration. As I told you, it's more than 10%. So here it will be severe dehydration. Okay. Treatment, I told you it can be rehydration or maintenance. No? Rehydration is when you give him ORS, intravenous or oral, maintaining this. Then the goal of rehydration phase is to restore normal hydration. Should take not more than 4 hours. So within 4 hours, they will restore the condition. Set the rate of intravenous infusion. So at what rate he has to take intravenous. Then lactated ringer solution is preferred for isotonic sodium chloride solution because saline does not correct metabolic acidosis. So in some cases, instead of saline, they have to give lactated ringer solution. So this is the difference. When it is very severe, they have to give lactated ringer solution instead of saline, as saline does not work for metabolic acidosis. Okay. So this is also about treatment, about ORS, how much ORS is to be given, and as we have to give lot of fluids to the patient so that he recovers fast. So giving fluids should not be restricted. Okay. Symptoms and treatment. So after receiving the therapy, the patients that fulfill these three criteria can be discharged. So he should be able to take adequate oral intake. So he should be able to eat on his own. Then urine flow should be normal, and maximum diarrhea flow should be 400 cc per hour. Okay, so it should not be more than this. So those patients are discharged. Under these criteria, the patients are discharged. Antibiotic treatment, antimicrobial therapy is useful, like prompt eradication of Vibrio, then diminish the duration of diarrhea, decrease the fluid loss. So when you give eradication for like antibiotic therapy for Vibrio, obviously the diarrhea will decrease and the fluid loss also will decrease. Okay, antimicrobial therapy is you're giving antibiotics to kill the organism. So they will be eradicated soon, and the diarrhea also will reduce and fluid loss also will be reduced. Okay. The antibiotics should be administered to moderate or severe cases only. These are the different antibiotics which are used. Okay. In case of adults, it is doxycycline, ciprofloxacin, and azithromycin. In case of pregnant women, it's azithromycin only or erythromycin. Okay. In case of children, it is erythromycin or azithromycin. Okay. Children less than 3 years. Children less than 3 years, you have to give erythromycin 12.5 or azithromycin 20 in a single dose. So this is about the treatment, and basically you have to maintain sanitation. To prevent the disease, you have to maintain sanitation, proper hygiene conditions, and educate the people to maintain sanitation and hygiene. Like people in poor people living in slum areas, they are not much aware of how they're drinking contaminated water, the cooking with contaminated water. So all this multiplies the organism's infection increases. Okay. So it is if what like I told you all that is sewage water. The pipelines are not good or not properly done, so sewage water gets mixed with drinking water. Okay. Also, that drinking water then when used for drinking or cooking, it contaminates the food and it contaminates. And when you drink it, Vibrio cholerae, you ingest Vibrio cholerae. Okay. And also seafood get contaminated with these dirty waters around. So this is all about cholera. I hope it is clear. Vibrio cholerae is the organism gram negative, spreads through contaminated water and food. Okay, it spreads through contaminated water and food. Then I told you all it should be treated immediately. Hmm? Symptoms are these depending upon the percentage of infection. Hmm? I hope everything is clear. Okay, so this is how a person with severe dehydration looks. The skin becomes pale, eyes, sunken eyes, these are called as sunken eyes, then leads low sugar levels lead to seizures and coma. Okay, and there are types like cholera sicca and cholera gravis, which are severe. Rapid loss of blood flow, body fluids is there in these cases. This is most peculiar thing for diarrhea is rice water stools. Okay, so whenever they say rice water stools, it is diarrhea. Hmm? Okay, just going through the slides for you all. This is in children. Hmm? Lot of weakness because loss of body fluids and body weight also goes down drastically. I hope cholera, everything is clear about cholera. Small intestine. Okay. You all have books to study. From where are you all planning to study? From where are you all planning to study? Okay. Okay. Is cholera clear for all of you? If cholera is clear, we'll go to typhoid. Swarupa, Swarupa, Sahiti. Okay. Swarupa, you're there or not? Okay. I'll continue with typhoid or 5 minutes break. Okay. In 5 minutes, we'll do typhoid. Hmm? Shall we start? Sahiti, Pragati, Swarupa. Okay. Okay. Asma has not joined. What happened to her? I've given in the group also today the two topics. Still, okay. So, typhoid, as we all know, the causative organism is Salmonella typhi. Okay, you have heard about it, Salmonella typhi, and you have done laboratory diagnosis also, I think, in the last semester, in the fifth semester, you all had a laboratory diagnosis. You have used the kit for typhoid. We had this practical in your last semester, fifth semester. You have done the Salmonella typhi test. I don't know how many of you were present, but you have done this. Okay, so it is an antigen antibody test, which is a typhoid test. Positive organism, Salmonella typhi, and these are the symptoms. Okay, sweating, chills, headache, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, fever. So symptoms are mostly common in both cholera and typhoid, but here the causative organism is Salmonella typhi. You have fever also. In case of diarrhea, you don't have. In case of cholera, you don't have fever. Hmm? Fever, headache, and all is not there in case of cholera. But in case of typhoid, you have fever, headache, vomiting, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. Okay, so organism Salmonella typhi. And the disease is clinically characterized by you have fever for continuously 2 to 3 weeks. So this is how you can differentiate cholera from typhoid. Is in this case in typhoid it starts with fever. Okay, it starts initially with fever, and then vomiting, dehydration. All this gradually are the next in the next phases. Like initially it starts with high fever. Hmm? It comes under enteric infections, okay, affecting the intestines. Includes both typhoid and paratyphoid fevers. The disease may occur sporadically, epidemically, and endemically. You all understand these terms, okay? Sporadic, epidemic, and endemic. I hope you all know these now. And currently, what we are facing of corona is it comes under pandemic. Okay, it is worldwide spread. It is pandemic. Hmm? So then epidemiology, Salmonella is the major organism which causes enteric fever. This is the bacteria, how it looks like, typhoid bacilli, Salmonella typhi. Hmm? So they belong to the genus Enterobacteriaceae. E. coli also comes under Enterobacteriaceae. You all know that. Hmm? So it belongs to Enterobacteriaceae and they are gram negative, distinguished from other bacteria by biochemical antigen structures. So depending upon the biochemical and antigen structure, they are distinguished from other bacilli. Okay. So has three main antigens: the O antigens, the H antigen, and the VI antigens. Syphilis survives intracellularly in the tissues of various organs. So it penetrates the tissues of various organs and survives there and multiplies in the body. Okay. Even after the patient recovers from typhoid, he still is a carrier. Okay. He still becomes a carrier and the stools of the patient still discharge typhi, Salmonella typhi. Okay, it is readily killed by drying, pasteurization, and common disinfectants. And you know that pasteurization mostly it kills most of the organisms. Most of the organisms are killed by pasteurization. And common disinfectants. Disinfectants, we know they will kill the organisms. Factors which influence the onset of typhoid fever are the dose, infecting dose, and virulence of the organism. So, as I told you in the previous cholera thing also, that the amount of organism which you have taken and which you have ingested, so that is called as the infecting dose. This is called as the infecting dose and the virulence of the organism. And I told you man is the reservoir of the infection, so he becomes a carrier. Reservoir, I've already explained to you, where the more amount of, in this case it is more amount of organism. Okay, so the more amount of organism is present and it multiplies within human beings, so he becomes a carrier, infectious carrier. A case is infectious as long as bacilli appears in stools or urine. Okay, so even after the patient is cured, he is infectious if the bacilli is appearing in stools and urine samples. So he remains a carrier for many years. Okay, the carrier may be temporary, incubatory, or chronic. So, as I told you all, it can be temporary or it can be for a longer time. Chronic means for many years. So, convalescent carriers excrete bacilli for 6 to 8 weeks, after which their numbers diminish rapidly by the end of 3 months. So, this comes under convalescent carriers, like short term carriers, which the bacilli is excreted for 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, and then reduces by the end of third month. So people who excrete bacilli for more than 1 year are often our clinical attack are called chronic carriers. So I told you it will be year or more than 1 year. They are called as chronic carriers. Okay. In most chronic carriers, the bacilli exists in gallbladder and in the biliary tract. Okay, a chronic carrier may excrete the bacilli for several years. It's written like 50 years or so. Also, like what happens is you become resistant to it. Yeah, because of antibiotics, your body becomes resistant to it. But still, the organism survives within your body without you showing any symptoms. So you are called as a carrier. So you can be carrier for several years. So there was a lady called Mary, Typhoid Mary. Okay, she used to supply food. So she used to go around places supplying food. So this is when first case was identified. So the primary source of infection, she gave rise to 1300 cases in her lifetime. Okay, and this is an example of chronic carrier, because throughout her life she was a carrier and she was a food supplier. So wherever she supplied food, the infection got spread, and then finally they could make out that this lady is common among all those people who are coming with typhoid cases. This lady was found to be the common factor. She was supplying food to those, so then they could find out this, and this lady was actually jailed in those that era. They used to do this, so this lady was jailed. So fecal carriers are more common than urinary carriers. This prisoner in New York, so she was prisoned there when they found out this. So the source of infection, the primary source of infection are feces and urine. The secondary sources can be food, water, fingers, and flies. Okay. So primarily the infection starts from the urine and feces of cases, and it can then spread through contaminated water, food, or fingers and flies. Okay. So water, I've explained you all how it spreads through water, and then food when cooked with contaminated water also gets contaminated. Then the fingers, like hands, like if you all are eating, Street food, I've told you all street food is very risky. If you're eating street food, those people don't wash their hand or even sanitize their hand. So the contamination is much more in those street foods, and flies, we know how flies transmit the infection from one food to another. So age is not a factor for this. Typhoid may occur at any age. Gender, males are mostly affected, they say, than females. Hmm. Immunity at all ages are susceptible to infection. The host factors contribute to resistance to bacilli are gastric acidity and local intestinal immunity. So the depending upon the gastric acidity, okay, and local intestinal immunity, they are the the survival of the bacilli within your intestine depends upon the gastric acidity and your intestinal immunity. Now, environmental factors which affect this disease are it's mostly during July and September. Enteric fevers are observed throughout the year, but the peak is in July September. Now, why is it July September? We all know because July September is the peak time for rainy season. Okay, it is the peak time for rainy season. During rainy season, the groundwater gets contaminated with sewage water. Okay, and as the chances of spread are high through urine and stools, so the sewage water, when it gets mixed with drinking water, groundwater, okay, so the water gets once the water gets contaminated, the disease spreads fast. Food also gets contaminated, okay, as water gets contaminated. Is it clear till here? I cannot hear you all. That is a problem for me. Okay, it's not fast, no. Hmm? I hope it's not. Okay. 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 So it is the season which is responsible for the fast spread. That is the peak time of the infection. Generally, these infections won't much happen during summer seasons. Okay. You'll know all the infections mostly come up during the rainy season. Then vegetables grown in sewage or farmlands or washed in contaminated water. I told you all. So sometimes farmlands are also the underground water gets contaminated due to sewage, the seepage of sewage. Okay, if the sewage system generally in villages is not good. Okay, so all the farmlands where vegetables are grown, and supposing the sewage is beside somewhere, it penetrates into the groundwater. The groundwater is contaminated, and vegetables grown in this sewage water. Mostly, it happens vegetables grow in sewage water. So, vegetables grown in sewage water will definitely have the contamination. Okay, they grow rapidly in milk or without altering in taste or appearance also. So you will not even know that it is in milk and it is growing rapidly. And so the cases are more when you ingest raw milk. Huh? Sometimes people drink raw milk also. So the chances of getting infection are more in raw milk because it is not heated. Raw milk is not heated, and if not heated, after heating, organisms are killed. Okay, but raw milk is not heated, so the number of organisms present in raw milk are always more than the heated milk. Okay, so social factors like pollution of drinking water, supplies, open air defecation and urination, low standards of food and personal hygiene, and health ignorance. Okay, so it is where they have open air defecation. So this is also, all these are in underdeveloped places only. Developed countries do not have these problems much because hygiene is good, people understand better sanitation. Okay, they have proper sanitation, proper washrooms. Now in villages you don't have proper washrooms, so there is open air defecation and urination. So, okay, so when they do open air defecation and urination, there are chances of spread are more. Okay, chances of spreading the organism are more, and low standards of food and personal hygiene and health ignorance. Okay, so of course, when the food standards are low, the chances of contamination are more. Personal hygiene and health, all these are very important factors. Fever may be regarded as an index of general sanitation in any country. Okay, so typhoid is identified as a index of sanitation. Okay, index of sanitation means the more the number of cases of typhoid, the more number of cases of typhoid, you can conclude that the country is poorly sanitized. Hmm? Sanitation system is not good in the country. The less the number of typhoid cases, you can conclude that this country has good sanitation. Hmm? So this is how typhoid is regarded as the index of sanitation of any country, because depending upon if the sanitation is not good, typhoid cases are more. So on this basis, you can judge a country's sanitation also. So coming to incubation, it's generally 10 to 14 days. Okay, it is 10 to 14 days, and but it can be as short as 3 to 3 days or as long as 3 weeks also. So the incubation period is quite variable. It changes depending upon the dose of bacilli ingested. As I told you, depending upon the amount of bacilli which you have taken or consumed or ingested. It's transmitted via fecal oral route or urine oral route. I told you all, feces and urine, as they are the common sources of transmission. It could have transmitted through fecal oral route or urine oral route. So this may take place directly through soiled hands. Huh? Soiled hands means dirty hands. Okay, soiled hands means not soil and hand. Soiled hands means, like we say, soiled clothes. So soiled hands means dirty hands which are contaminated with feces or urine of carriers or cases. They, and when they are ingested, okay, or when the food, water or milk gets contaminated, or indirectly by the ingestion of contaminated food, milk, water, or through flies. Okay, so this is how the chances of spread are more through contaminated hands. So that is why it's said like wash your hands frequently. So when you wash your hands frequently, the chances of any contamination are less. Okay, any organism is less. So this is the mode of transmission. Feces and urine. It can contaminate water. It can contaminate soil, flies, and fingers. So these feel kind of contagious. Okay. So when it is transferred through food, water, or soil, or even touch. Okay, contaminated hands when you touch. So these finally contaminate the food and raw cooked food. Okay, and so it also directly through mouth of, where it can enter the mouth of a well person. Hmm? So this is how it is. It is called fecal oral route or urine oral route. Hmm? So the onset is insidious and children may be abrupt with chills and high fever. So you will not understand when it's generally fever is a common thing in children, but you cannot make out that it is typhoid which is coming up. Hmm? Okay. So symptoms are like there is malaise, headache, cough, sore throat with abdominal pain and constipation. Okay. So you will have headache, you will have cough and sore throat, often combined with abdominal pain and constipation. Then after about 10 days, the fever reaches a plateau and the patient looks toxic, appearing exhausted and often prostrated. Okay. So after 7 to 10 days, like you are not able to make out in the initial days, initial stages, you cannot make out it is typhoid. But after 7 to 10 days, the fever reaches a plateau and the patient looks toxic, appearing exhausted and often prostrated. Okay, there may be marked constipation, especially in the early stages, or pea soup diarrhea. So, in the initial stages, you have constipation, or it can also be pea soup diarrhea. You have abdominal distension, leukopenia, blood urine, leukopenia and blood and urine stool culture is positive. Okay, so you have to do stool culture, urine culture, or blood culturing. Are you all understanding? Hmm? So, if there are no complications, the patient's condition improves in 7 to 10 days. Okay, and if there are no further complication, the patient will improve in 7 to 10 days. However, relapse may occur for up to 2 weeks after termination of therapy. Like if you have stopped the therapy, this may relapse in 2 weeks again. Okay, and during early phase, physical findings are few, so you cannot detect in the early phases. And later you have splenomegaly, abdominal distension, tenderness, relative bradycardia, dichotic pulse, and occasionally meningismus appear. Hmm? So these are all the symptoms which come up. So the rash, or they're called as rose spots because they are rose spots which come up on your body during the second week. Okay, found principally on the trunk is a pink papule 2 to 3 mm in diameter that fades on pressure. It disappears in third to fourth week. Okay, so without treatment, it comes up and goes. This kind of rashes they come. Hmm? On your abdomen and on the back. Can you see the image? It is these kind of spots which come up in the second week or third week, which commonly appear in the second week and it disappears into third or fourth week. Serious complication occur in up into 10% of patients, especially those who have been ill for longer than 2 weeks. So if they were sick for more than 2 weeks and who have not received proper treatment, okay. So if they have not received proper treatment, serious complications it may lead to. Now, intestinal hemorrhage is manifested by a sudden drop in temperature and signs of shock, followed by dark or fresh blood in the stool. So, sometimes you also have blood in the stool. Then, sudden drop in temperature, and there are signs of shock. Intestinal perforations is most likely to occur during third week. Okay, and frequent complications are like urinary retention, pneumonia, thrombophlebitis, myocarditis, psychosis, cholecystitis, nephritis, and osteomyelitis. Laboratory diagnosis, coming to laboratory diagnosis. Okay, I told you all in for cholera and for tuberculosis also. First, microscopic culture, that is microbiological. Under microbiological, you have microscopic culture, then serological, biochemical, and then comes the molecular diagnosis procedures. So this is how it is. You have to first isolate the organisms. You have grown typhi in lab, no? You have grown typhi in the lab. Yes or no? Your seniors have done that. No. Okay. Salmonella typhi is there. It was there last year in our lab. Your seniors have grown it. I think this year also sir will tell you all to do, because they have done with contaminated sewage water, and they've got good salmonella typhi last time. All the organisms they have done. Okay, clear. We're going to diagnosis part of typhoid. Okay, diagnosis part of typhoid. So I told you all, we have to first, to grow any organism, we need to isolate it. We will be isolating the bacilli from blood, bone marrow, or stools. Blood culture is the mainstay of diagnosis for this disease. Okay, so mostly they do blood culturing. Lex Vidal test. Okay, this is the Vidal test which you have done in the lab. I remember you all doing Vidal test last semester. Okay, the O antigen and H antigen I showed you all in the lab. The kit is there which has O antigen and the H antigen. Okay, O somatic antigen, H is the flagellar antigen. So usually O antibodies appear on the 6 to 8 days and H antibodies on the 10th to 12 days after the onset of the disease. Okay. So Vidal test is the antigen antibody test. Serological, I've told you, serological means antigen antibody test. So Vidal is an antigen antibody test, and generally these antigens are supplied in the kit. In the kit, you are supplied with O and the H antigen, and in your serum sample, it is expected that it will have O and the H antibodies. So if you're doing the test in the 6th or 8th day, you will get the O positive. The O antigen will bind to the O antibody. The O antigen of the kit will bind to the O antibody, and it will show you what, agglutination or no agglutination. When the O antigen and O antibody combine, there is agglutination. Okay, so that is how you will say it's positive test. Then the H antigen and the H antibody, when they combine, it is a positive set. It will show antibodies coagulation. So that H comes up on 10th and 12 days. Okay, H comes in front after 10th to 12 days. So if you're doing the test after 10 to 12 days, you will get H positive. If you're doing it in the early days of 6 to 8, it will show O positive. I mean O antigen present. Usually performed in acute serum, has moderate sensitivity, specificity. Okay. Then some of the new tests are ideal Tubex test, then LPS test, okay, lipopolysaccharide one, then using anti-human IgM antibody, okay, then control, okay. Till here you have studied about the organism, you have studied about the pathogenesis, how it spreads, you have studied about the you have studied about the organism, then the spread, the pathogenesis, then the diagnosis. Diagnosis is very important. Diagnosis first, microbiological, microscopical, then the serological test, okay, then the other tests like molecular tests, and then some few new ones like IDL Tubex tests, lipopolysaccharide antigen test, okay. Diagnosis, treatment. Control of this, control and elimination, that it can be done by proper sanitation, proper public health. If it is maintained, you can control the disease. If sanitized water is supplied, okay, if contaminated water sources are closed, only then you can expect complete sanitation. Okay, these are the three lines of defense. So it has to be control of reservoir, that is human beings, control of sanitation, and immunization. Immunization means What do you mean by immunization? Immunization means what? Prashant, vaccination. Yes. So one of the points is vaccination. Okay. And cases of early diagnosis. Okay. This in any fever and any infection, early diagnosis is important so that the treatment starts sooner. Culture of blood and stools are important investigations in the diagnosis of cases. So mostly blood is used for culturing or stool is used for culturing. Okay. So isolation. How do you isolate typhoid infectious disease? The cases are to be transferred to hospital. As it is infectious, it has to be transferred to a hospital. Okay. Now for treatment, there are different antibiotics. The most common one is fluoroquinones, are widely regarded as a drug of choice for treatment of typhoid. These are the antibiotics which can be used: ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin, ceftriaxone, ceftriaxone. It is ceftriaxone, azithromycin, chloramphenicol. Okay, then when it is severe typhoid, you need to give ciprofloxacin, ceftriaxone, and ceftriaxone and ceftriaxone. So they are relatively inexpensive and well tolerated and more reliable and effectively than chloramphenicol, ampicillin, amoxicillin, and trimethoprim and sulfamethoxylin. Okay. Now, patients seriously ill and profoundly toxic should be given injection of hydrocortisone for 4 days. Then stools and urine of the infected person are the sole source of infection. They should be received in a closed container and disinfected. Okay, so whenever you ask for a stool sample or a urine sample, it has to be given in a separate container which can be disinfected later, with 5% Cresol for at least 2 hours. Now, oil, soil clothes, and linen should be soaked in 2% chlorine. Chlorine, you know, is a disinfectant. Hmm? So, the soil clothes of the patient and the linen, I mean the bed sheets and all the cloths which they use should be soaked in 2% chlorine and steam sterilized. Doctors and nurses should disinfect their hands frequently. Okay. Now, examination of stools and urine should be done for 3 to 4 months after discharge also. So, it's not that the person is discharged and cured, you stop the treatment. Okay. As soon as the person gets discharged, also 3 to 4 months after discharge, and 12 months, and again 12 months it should be done to prevent the development of the carrier state. Okay, so that he doesn't become a carrier. So repeated examination of stool should be done in 3 to 4 months and again in 12 months. Okay. Now, since carriers are the ultimate source of infection, their identification and treatment is one of the most radical ways to control typhoid. Okay, so because the carriers are the ultimate source of infection, so you need to identify these carriers first to control typhoid. Hmm? Okay. So the following measures are recommended. Identification. Carriers are identified by cultural and serological examinations, and duodenal drainage establishes the presence of salmonella in the biliary tract of carriers. Okay, so you need to do the duodenal drainage system also examine. The antibodies are present in about 80% of chronic cases. So the cases becomes immune, but they become carriers of the organism. Hmm? Treatment I have discussed with you all. Okay. So this is in severe cases, it is amoxicillin or ampicillin is given for 6 weeks. TMP SMZ, this is an exceptional antibiotic. Then ciprofloxacin should be given for 28 days. And norfloxacin twice daily, you can give it for 28 days also. I hope everything is clear. Okay, surgery or cholecystectomy with concomitant ampicillin therapy has been regarded as the most successful approach to treat the carriers. So, if the carriers have to be treated completely, they have used this technique to completely treat the carriers. Okay, and the carriers should be kept under surveillance. They should be prevented from handling food or water. Okay. And as I told you all, it is the management of carriers continues to be an unsolved problem, and sanitation is the best way to control this disease. Okay, proper sanitation is the best way to control this disease. That is protection and purification of drinking water supplies, improvement of basic sanitation, and promotion of food hygiene, okay, are essential measures to interrupt transmission of typhoid fever. Okay, so these are the important steps which should be taken to prevent the typhoid fever. Also, immunization and vaccination. Okay, immunization is a complementary approach to prevent the typhoid, but it yields the highest benefit to money spent. Okay, so immunization is important. Hmm? And you have the anti-typhoid vaccines which can be given. Does not give 100% protection, but definitely lowers the infection rate. Like in case of corona, even if you have taken vaccine, it does not give 100% protection, but it definitely lowers the incidence of infection. Can be given at any age after 2 years. Okay, so there are two types of vaccines: VI polysaccharide vaccine and type 21A vaccine. Hmm? So there are two types of vaccine for typhoid. So the VI polysaccharide vaccine is composed of the VI antigen. In the beginning, we studied the antigens OH and VI. Okay, VI is the capsular polysaccharide. So this is known as the polysaccharide antigen. VI is the capsular polysaccharide. Okay. So the vaccine is administered subcutaneously or intramuscularly. The target value of each single human dose is 25 micrograms of antigen, and the vaccine is stable for 6 months at 37 degrees Celsius and for 2 years at 22 degrees Celsius. Okay. Vaccine to maintain protection and co-administered with other vaccines such as yellow fever, hepatitis A, and routine childhood. So it is combined and given with other vaccines also. Okay, is it clear? Typhoid, all of you, please answer. Okay, Shiba. Okay, I'll just go through the slides one reverse so that you all recollect it. Hmm? So this is one vaccine, type 21A vaccine. The other one is VI vaccine. So it is, the recommendation is to repeat the test after every 3 years for people living in endemic areas. So every 3 years you need to test yourself for typhoid. And every year for individuals traveling from one place to another. So there are many people whose job is to travel. Okay, like there are many people who need to travel, and those people who frequently travel from an infectious place to another, they have the chances of getting the infection again. Okay. Okay. Okay, so these are some of the facts about the typhoid fever. So globally, typhoid causes an estimated death of 21 million cases and around 2 lakh deaths every year. Comes from bacilli, Salmonella typhi, and may spread through contaminated food, water, or with contact with an infected person. And 70% of the people infected from typhoid come from international traveling. So that is what people traveling from one place to another, they are the ones who transfer the disease from one place to another. And about 3 to 5% of people may still carry the typhoid bacteria fever even if symptoms go away and off treatment. Okay, so even if they do not show any symptoms and even if they are cured, they are still carriers of the infection. Okay, so these are the things which can be had for typhoid cures, like bubble bark tea, guava tree flowers, bitter gourd leaves, and carrot soup. So these are all the things which help in curing typhoid. I will go through the slides once again for your to recollect. Okay. So these two type of vaccines. Then the children at high risk of infection are school children, their hospital staff, then travelers proceeding from endemic areas and those attending melas and yatras. Okay, so those places which are highly populated or polluted. Then, okay, just go through the slides to recollect. Fluoroquinones, okay, are widely regarded as a drug of choice for typhoid treatment. Okay, so you have to consider it negative till 3 consecutive samples are negative. Okay, so like now we just do one test, and if it's positive, positive, it's negative, negative. Not like that in case of typhoid. Okay, in case of typhoid, you need to take 3 bacteriological sample, the negative stools and urines. Only then it is considered as a negative sample on 3 separate days. Okay, so 3 separate days you need to do urine and stool examination, and then you can conclude that it's negative only if it is negative for all the 3 consecutive days. Hmm? Okay, human beings are the reservoirs for infection. I told you all. Defense depends upon the control of reservoir, control of sanitation, and immunization. Okay, So how you can prevent from a human being a reservoir, then how you can control maintain sanitation, then how do you do immunization. Hmm? Okay. So the different tests are serological. You have Vidal test. You have the other one is ideal Tubex test. This is under the new diagnostic test. You have the ideal Tubex test and lipopolysaccharide test. Okay, so when you are studying about the diagnosis factor, okay, when you're studying about the diagnosis part of every disease, just remember there are different medias which are used for the growth of different organisms. Okay, so for typhoid, then for tuberculosis I told you all that day, then for cholera, so vibrio cholerae, so there are selective mediums. So you need to basically you need to remember, as I told you all, the main things are microbiological test, serological test, molecular test. Okay, and then if new some tests are available, and under those you have to remember which test. Okay, particularly like Vidal for typhoid. So like that you need to remember which test is done for which organism. Then you need to remember the main selective medias which are used for their growth, like what they used for to grow typhi, then for cholera, then for tuberculosis. So those are the important things you need to remember. Then you can write on your own the diagnosis part also. So the OH antigens, then the VI, that is the capsular polysaccharide. VI is the capsular polysaccharide antigen. Okay. Then stools. In this case, it is followed by dark of flesh, blood in the stool. Whereas in case of cholera, it was white stools, rice water stools. Okay. Here it is, okay, these are the differentiation points. Like here you have after 2 to 3 weeks of fever, you have the rose spots over the trunk or the back. You have these red spots coming up, which are called as the rose spots, which diminishes after few weeks. See, it disappears in 3 to 4 days. Then it is pink papule, 2 to 3 mm in diameter. Okay. I hope everything is clear about typhoid and cholera. So this is how the transmission is: contaminated feces and urine, then water, soil, flies, and fingers get contaminated. These finally contaminate the food, and the raw and uncooked food, chances of contamination more, then which will contaminate the mouth of a well person. Okay, so soil hands are the main source of contamination. Go through the slides so that you all don't forget. Okay, vegetables grown in sewage and farmlands, or vegetables washed with contaminated water. Peak is July, September, rainy season, where the chances of water infection are more. Okay, carriers can be chronic carriers or convalescent carriers. Convalescent is 6 to 8 years, 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, short period, and chronic is for a year or more. Okay, more than a year, they are called as chronic carriers. Okay. This is the organism gram negative, facultative anaerobe, and belongs to the group Enterobacteriaceae. Major cause of enteric fever comes under enteric fever. Okay, these are the symptoms as I told you all. And of course, because of all these symptoms, the person becomes very weak. Hmm? Because of vomiting, because of diarrhea, abdominal pain. See, they are shown rose spots also. So, because of all this, the person becomes very weak. And in case of cholera, he becomes more, deteriorates more faster because of loss of water is more fast. Hmm? Okay. I hope everything about typhoid is clear to you all today. Typhoid and cholera, both we have covered. I hope both the topics are clear to you all. Answer. Any doubts? Typhoid and cholera. If it's okay, shall I go ahead with syphilis? Mode of action, you don't have to study for drugs, diseases. You see the syllabus. It's you don't have to mode of action in that. It's only about the organism, pathogenesis, culturing, diagnosis, and treatment of these organisms, which you have in this unit. It is the third unit. Shall I go ahead with syphilis? If you all want 5 minutes break, there is lots to complete. Sahiti, Pragati, Shiba, what do you all say? Already 2 hours? I know it's 2 hours. Okay, next class we'll do syphilis and gonorrhea. I hope today's topics were clear. Thank you.